Greetings. My name is BKTinker, and I'd like to be Champlain College's new Senior Instructional Designer. At present, I'm a full professor and program director of the Digital Media and Graphic Design programs at Colorado Mountain College. I've accomplished a lot of things at the college I'm very proud of, but Glenwood Springs, where my campus is located and where I live, is a small town. It's 3.5 hours away from a major metropolitan area or even an airport. And my wife has graciously allowed me to pursue my passions here at Colorado Mountain College for the last 14 years. I need to allow her to pursue her aspirations. She's a mental health clinician and needs to be in a larger market. So we're going to move to Reno, and this position, being remote, would support that. There are several specific things about Champlain College that appeal to me. It's well regarded. Many of the degrees offered are in the areas of technology or design, or business. Those are all areas of my experience and interest. I like the fact that it's a small, private, not for profit college of around 2,000 students, as was my undergraduate college. And so I have some inherent understanding of the environment for the students and the staff. And lastly, my understanding is I will be developing asynchronous online courses. In my experience, asynchronous online instruction design is often more challenging than instructional design for other modalities. I welcome the opportunity to continue my history of succeeding against that challenge. Easy is boring and not very fulfilling. In the application instructions, I was asked to share some of my work. In addition to what I'm going to share with you now, I have a web page with other examples, and there's a link to it in the comment section below. I want to provide some context so that you can better judge the efficacy of the course I'm going to show you. Now, this is a course entitled Creativity and Visual Thinking. It's a first year, freshman year course for most of our students. It's required for our digital media, graphic design, and professional photography programs. It's intended to provide students with a foundation in visual communication. And this course is taught both asynchronously and in a face-to-face hybrid modality. Today, I'm going to present the asynchronous online version. This is the Canvas course shell for creativity and visual thinking. We're in the student view as opposed to the instructor view, so that I can show you the course as the students are going to see it. This course, like all the courses I create, focuses on minimizing the amount of information that the student has to try to decipher. This is best practices when it comes to online instruction. So they're only allowed to see the things that they actually need to interact with. Everything is under modules. There aren't ways for them to navigate directly to assignments or discussions or quizzes, etc. We want them to access everything through the modules. This is the landing page, gives some general course information, information about textbooks. There aren't any for this course. There's a couple ones that are recommended. File naming conventions, deadlines, grading, a way for them to verify their personal information to make sure that the correct email address is connected to the account, and then ways to set an appointment with the instructor. There are announcements. It makes use of the built-in course syllabus. Again, this makes it simpler for both the instructors and the students. And it also makes it possible for the college to push out content changes. I don't remember the last time we had a semester where they didn't want something worded differently in the syllabus. And using the digital syllabus within Canvas makes that process a lot easier, more accurate. And we have the modules, which are kind of the meat of the course. Each of these has a specific subject or title for that particular module. In week one, we're going to start off with a course schedule. This tells them the beginning and end dates, etc. And there's also an introductory quiz. The purpose of this quiz, and it's not graded, is to establish a baseline from an assessment standpoint. At the end of the semester, they're going to take this exact same quiz, and theoretically, if the course is doing its job, the class, as an average, will score higher on that final quiz than they do on this one. This makes it real direct and very, very quantifiable. And that's the sort of data that our assessment office is looking for. And so that's why this course, includes that and why it's built that way. I share with the students a PDF document that is a lexicon of visual communications. And that document is referred to throughout the assignments in the class and the discussions. And they're often required to use terminology from that document. Um, Part of what we're trying to get them to understand in this class is that there is a language to visual communications. And if you learn that language where you can speak it to other professionals, particularly, that greatly reduces the chance for misunderstandings and miscommunications. And so we want them early on in their college experience to be exposed to that lexicon and have lots of practice in using it. Then there's a PowerPoint presentation. That's what this one looks like. We all use the same template. I built this template so it is specifically ADA compliant. That took some doing. Any of you who've worked with ADA compliance in the digital realm. And this is a 84-page, it's quite a long document that introduces a lot of these principles. One of the reasons why it's so long is it goes over multiple descriptive models, because the students need to understand that the visual communications field can't decide on how it wants to talk about things. And so there are 7 principles of this and 6 rules of that and 8 something of something. And it's all dancing around the same topics, but using different models to describe them. And that sort of uncertainty and chaos is something they're going to have to get used to, because that's commonplace in the visual professions, where there's not only are there multiple ways of doing the same thing, but there are multiple ways to talk about the same thing. Words have multiple meanings. Oftentimes they're context specific. And so that's one reason why this is such a long presentation. There's a lot to go over. There's a discussion as an online class. That's one of the primary ways that you get the students to interact with each other. And there's a discussion on creativity tips for all. They watch a video, and then they discuss in the discussion what parts of that LinkedIn Learning lesson did they find the most helpful or have the most application to what they think they'll be doing in their career. And then we have a simple assignment to start them off. It's a phrase visualization, and it's they're given a list of phrases, and then they choose one to turn into a visual. Week 2, there's a presentation on the development of symbols. There are some reference documents. From a structural standpoint, you'll notice that everything that has a grade attached to it is on the far left. Resources, where there's no grade attached, are indented. So a student can tell at a pretty good glance, scrolling down, where their grade instances are. And it makes it easier for them to make sure that they're doing all the assignments that have grades associated with it. So these are some references. We have an assignment, again, as a discussion. And then we have this thing called the process statement. From this point forward in this class and all their other classes, students are required to do a process statement with every assignment. And the purpose of the process statement, and it can be a paragraph, it doesn't have to be anything particularly long, but the purpose of the process assignment is to have the students report on any particular challenges they encountered in doing the project, maybe what the inspiration for their concept was. It might go through their problem-solving process, and then they're supposed to do an analysis within that statement of how well they think their project turned out. And it's a opportunity for them to be introspective. The comments that they make about their project may not be positive. They may not be happy with the way it turned out, but they can absolutely learn something from that experience. And so we want them to do this process statement. That's going to be part of every other assignment in the class and all their future classes in these programs. And this is where they're introduced to that as a requirement. In all future projects, it's just a item in the rubric. It doesn't have its own assignment. Module 3, we have some resources on the elements and principles of art. We have a resource about artificial intelligence. Here in Colorado, there was a gentleman who won first place in a statewide art competition. And it turned out that the work he did had been generated by AI. So it's very controversial. The class doesn't take a position on that, but I want the students to read that article, and then we have a discussion about it within these discussion assignments. Um, there we have other courses that go into generative AI, et cetera, a lot deeper, but we wanted to touch on it in almost every course because that's the reality that our students are facing. We have some resources, including one about optical illusions and how things aren't always what they see. And then there's an assignment to create optical illusion. Module 5 is on visual literacy. The resources here, it's a relatively long lesson of 3 or 4 hours on LinkedIn Learning. And then there's a associated project. Gestalt theory, we have some resources again in the form of the LinkedIn Learning videos, and then there's a fairly complex Gestalt project. Critical analysis, we have some resources on how to critique visual work and also some sample rubrics. The rubric that you use to critique a film is not necessarily the same rubric that you would use to critique a website or critique a logo design, etc. We want students to develop an understanding that what they're looking for when they're determining the efficacy of a piece is context driven. It's relative to the type of project it is and what the project objectives were, the communication objectives. Because ultimately, for visual communication professionals, the appearance, the aesthetic of their design or their project isn't really what's important. And really shouldn't be the primary thing it's judged on. What it should be judged on is how well it communicates the intended message to the intended audience. Module 8, we talk about creative block. We have a pretty lengthy PowerPoint lecture on creative block. We have a discussion on creative block. The pig's ear is a where they're supposed to find an item. It could be an object, it could be a website, it could be anything you can look at, and an item that's not working as well as it could, that's not as effective as it could be. And then they make suggestions on what could be done to improve it. This is a resource about understanding motion visuals. Working in motion is very, very different from working in static imagery. And then they're going to post their progress on the earlier pig's ear project here. And they have a new project that is motion-based. Multiple small assignments. They're doing multiple assignments, 5 assignments this week. So there's a lot of them, but there's no lecture content for them to view that week. And none of these projects is intended to dominate their entire week. One reason why we have this unit with multiple smaller assignments and where we have like the pig's ear that goes from one course into the next is to introduce the students to the reality of professional practice, where you are almost always juggling more than one project at a time, and where the ability to manage your time becomes very, very crucial. Module 11 is about composition specifically. The resources is about composition in film and photography, resources about composition for other types of visual artists. There is a presentation on visual hierarchy, which is one of the ways that a person who's creating visual communication, one of the ways they try to make sure that the message does what it's supposed to do is by using visual hierarchy to persuade and kind of direct people to engage with the visual piece in the way you want them to. Module 12 is more sound. They get to do homemade Foley sounds. The students actually really enjoy this particular assignment.
Module 14 talks about the tools and applications for digital 2D and 3D, different art styles. There's some linked learning lessons about Photoshop and digital drawing, Wacom tablets. It's all kind of getting them more familiar with what's available to them in the digital realm. Most students enter college with a single software application that they feel comfortable with, and it's usually Photoshop. And it's important to get them to understand early on that there are lots of different tools, each of which has its specific things it's good at and things maybe it's not as good at. We want them to make thoughtful choices about which technologies they use on projects, so that they can use the tools that are going to deliver the best result, not just the ones they're most comfortable with. Thanksgiving break, we got that off. Week 16, resources about the creative economy. And then this earlier pre-Thanksgiving assignment, we have this haters be hating. And what they do there is they submit something to the discussion that they really hate. It could be a product, it could be a company, it could be anything. And they have to explain why they really hate it. Then this assignment, which is hidden until this week, is they now have to create a multi-component campaign that promotes whatever it was that they hated. Students hate this assignment, but once they finished it, they have a better understanding of why it exists. And its point is, as professional visual communicators, you don't get to pick and choose the messages that you're working on. The client does that. And if you can do effective work, even when you are not just unenthused about it, but actually have opposition to it, if you can do that, then you should be able to operate in the professional visual communication world. Then there's review for the final exam, and in the last week of class, we critique the objection overruled, and they take that same quiz that they took at the beginning of the course. So that is Creativity and Visual Thinking, an online course. In the link in the section below, I include a plan for a course that was delivered remote real time, which is very different from asynchronous online. Thank you very much for your attention, and I appreciate your consideration.